Let's begin.
Okay, here we are with another Balaclava Rising, and my great friend Leon here. Would you like to inform us about and introduce us to our new guest?
Yes, we're very honored to have Michal Weinstein on. So Michal's an accomplished entrepreneur, is a graphic designer by profession, runs a very successful event planning business, and is also involved in the non-profit space, so Culture for a Cause. Michal's also a mother of four. Michal describes herself as a former normie who woke up in 2020 and also got cancelled 5 times. So Michal is also a social media influencer. She has a large following on Instagram and other platforms, and she's been cancelled many, many times. And Michal's father's tragic story, it's a very sad story, helped her see the corruption and inspired her to become the activist that she is today. So Michal, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure and an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Now, you got cancelled 5 times. So first of all, what did you do to get cancelled for 5 times? And secondly, you're an accomplished businesswoman. You've worked very hard to build an event planning business. So my second question to you is, why are you speaking out and why are you risking your reputation in business to do that?
It's a very good question. So thank God I'm my own boss. That makes all the difference in the world. Being my own boss means that I was able to be very outspoken without any care. I have a husband who is the main breadwinner in the family, so I didn't have big concerns of if I lost a little business, it was okay. It was a risk worth taking to save humanity. And truth be told, I don't believe I lost business doing what I do. In fact, anyone who decided not to hire me, there were 5 other people who wanted to hire me because of my position. So in my view, it didn't hurt me a bit. What did hurt me, and that was purposeful, was the fact that I devoted probably 80% of my day to do this. And that took away 80% of what I could have been billing clients. So I think it was me, personally, who kind of affected my business, and not because of my voice, but because of the fact that I didn't put my efforts into my business as I did to my social media activism.
And can I ask about the business with the graphic design? A big thing happening just the last few months is AI.
Yeah.
And how's that affecting your business?
I tested it out. I tested out one of the programs that allow you to create graphics, and I asked it to do all these logos for me, because that's what I do. I do logos, and honestly, they all were bad. I was like, none of these are acceptable, so I'm not worried right now. Perhaps one day soon I will be worried, but right now I still think that humans are more capable of doing a better job when it comes to customizing a logo for our client, as opposed to the AI, which kind of pulls things from the air and it's not really exact of what the client wants. So, but it is good in terms of generating images. Like if I were to say I'd love a butterfly with a tree in the background, it'll create a beautiful image like that. But I'm more about custom logos, so I'm not so worried about that.
Okay. Leon?
And so you obviously have a healthy skepticism of authority, and that ties into your own family history. Do you mind giving us, personally, when I heard your story, I found it, as I said before, it is sad, it's tragic, but it's also very inspiring. So I was hoping you can share that story with our viewers.
Sure. I'll try to do it as short as possible because it's obviously a very long story. But when I was 10 years old, my father disappeared into thin air. He left the house, never to return. There was a little bit of a background behind it that my mother was aware of. My father was being asked to be a witness against a friend of his who got involved with stolen bonds and somehow used my father as a mule unknowingly. So the FBI, when discovering this, asked my father to witness against him. And my father, being a Jewish Orthodox person who follows his rabbi, was told that it is absolutely not acceptable for a Jew to ever rat on another Jew. It's called being moser, which in Hebrew means to rat. So my father, who follows rabbis, decided to not follow the FBI, but to basically tell his friend what was going on and give him a warning. And in turn, his friend was very much connected to very bad people. And next thing you know, my father disappeared. So my mother suspected from the very beginning that his friend was involved with his murder, but there was no proof and there was no way to, there was nothing she could do about it because the friend was denying any involvement and the police were not really doing a very good job of investigating. And the case was cold and 19 years go by and we had no grave, no life insurance, no social security, no resolution. And we had to kind of accept the fact that my father just disappeared and he is dead. There's no question. He didn't run away, but we're never going to find his body because what's the chances, right? It's never happening. And no one was looking either. So it was kind of like a, closed case. And 19 years later, a miracle happened. My mom gets a knock on the door by the FBI who said that we believe we found your husband's body. We need your children's DNA to prove it. And my mother was like, how on earth can you find a body 19 years later? And how is that possible? And they explained that it's connected to a very large, famous case that's going to be all over the news. They warned her that she was going to be approached by reporters. And, and that was all they were able to tell her. So my mom calls me up. It was April 1st, April Fool's Day. She calls me up. I'm pregnant, very, very pregnant. I have 2 babies. And she tells me they might have found Abba's body, Abba's father. And I said, this is an April Fool's joke. I laughed. I said, it's a joke. But then I Googled it. I Googled the keywords, diamond dealer, body found, Brooklyn. I don't know, all the keywords. The next thing you know, it was on the New York Daily News on the cover of the page. And it was connected to cops. Now, as soon as I read that it was connected to cops, I called my mother and I said, remember how you used to suspect that the police were corrupt and you were this conspiracy theorist and you said that you think the FBI and the police are behind Abba's murder? And I used to laugh at you and everyone laughed at you and they thought you were crazy. Well, guess what? It says that police killed Abba. So OMG, like you were right. That was my first lesson, how conspiracy theories can actually be real and going with your gut can actually be true. And so turns out the friend of my father was connected to the mafia and the mafia hired the cops to kill my father. And on February 1986, they pulled him over, pretended that he was a hit and run. And they said, we need you to come down to the station with us to, whatever. And they drove him to a garage in Brooklyn, shot him, buried him in the garage. And he was buried there for 19 years until the case was cracked. That's a whole other story of how the case was cracked. It's also miraculous. And thank God the murderers were put to trial. They were convicted for life. They both died in prison. And justice was served. And we had a grave, which was the most incredible thing in the world.
What's it like when to have that happen where you've got 19 years of knowing, but not really knowing because they don't have the evidence to finally be gifted the evidence of here he is. It was
a gift. Exactly the words that you just said. I really felt like, what did I do to deserve this, God? Like I know I prayed for this, but I can't believe you actually gave me my answer and solved the case and gave me a grave. I mean, I could actually visit him now, and there was no better feeling than I flew to Israel to bury him, and I was very pregnant. I had to get special permission. I was due like 2 weeks later, and the doctor's like, 19 years later, we give you permission. You could go. If you have the baby in Israel, my blessing. Just go. And standing there over his body, which was no longer a body, obviously. It was literally like bones. And in Israel, you don't have a coffin. You're wrapped in a prayer shawl. So to just stand there in front of his prayer shawl, little tiny pile, but knowing that was my father and that he returned to us and that we're able to bury him God is great, right? Like I was really like, you're right. God, justice is always served at the end. Truth always rises. And it gave me this belief in God, a greater belief in God.
How old were you when your father disappeared?
I was a month shy of 10. I was just turning 10. Yeah. Wow. So I was really young, but I have very clear memories of everything. And I used to journal. Right after he disappeared, I started writing a journal because I knew that something crazy was happening in my life. And I kept that journal for, my whole life, basically. Like I have over 37 journals from that time period. from then till all the way till recently. So I really covered everything.
It must be extraordinary to have someone missing and not, the only other thing I could think worse would be have a child missing, but to have it missing because you can't really move on. I mean, maybe you could as a child, but your mother must be always thinking, is there any chance there's knocked on the door and he's just wandered off? That must be excruciating.
It's excruciating, which is why I had such sympathy for like 9/11 people who lost loved ones and didn't have bodies. I really had sympathy for those people. I was like, it's the worst pain in the world to not have a grave and to not have a full answer. So it's torture to not know where someone is.
How do you get past that? Is there something inside you that one day you go, okay, I'm moving on. I'm going to believe he's dead? Or do you always have a candle burning?
Well, I think that by the time I was 12, which was only 2 years later, my mom sat me down and said, he's dead. And that was when I started mourning, because before that, I had hope that he was going to come back. I was lied to, actually. I was told, he's missing, but we're going to find him. That's literally what I was told. But then at 12, she finally sat me down and said, let me tell you the story. He definitely is not alive. And so at that point, I mourned him. Like I knew he was dead. So I lived my life knowing that he's gone. And I also knew that he was killed by his friend's evil connections. Whoever, like I figured his friend hired someone to kill him, which was exactly what happened, basically. We didn't know it was cops, but we knew that his friend was involved. The friend, the name of the friend was always like the villain in my life. Like till today, that name, like I think he's still alive, that guy. And he got away with it, And so he's a villain, like he's the evil Haman or the evil Hitler. You know what I mean? That's what he was in my life. So we knew that he killed him.
Before you came on, while we were waiting for Leon, you talked about your grandparents, though. And that was a really inspiring story, even tragic, but still hope in the tragic. Could you tell us about that? Because I found
Yes, my great-grandfather was a diamond dealer, just like my father. My great-grandfather, Yisabi Cheskel, was a diamond dealer. And he was a very smart man. He was married with 3 kids. And I think it was in the 1930s, like the late 1930s, when he started realizing that things were going down for the Jews. He lived in Belgium. He was very wealthy and had a beautiful house. And he looked at his wife and said, we need to get out of here. I'm going to fly to England. I'm going to do my best to get a visa. But meanwhile, I'm going to give you a lot of diamonds, and I'm going to sew those diamonds into every crevice of your coat and the children's coat. This is what's going to save you. And while I'm gone trying to save you, you need to know that you need to escape if you have to. If you see that there's danger, use these diamonds to get away, and we will meet again. And so 5 years go by, and my great grandmother and the 3 children had a whole journey, but they never ended up in a concentration camp. They basically used those diamonds to get hidden in a brothel. A madam basically hid them in the attic of a brothel. They paid people to take them over borders, and they ended up going over the Swiss border, and they ended up going to Palestine, right? And they ended up reuniting with my great grandfather, and they still had diamonds left over to buy their first house.
Wow.
And that's how they started.
Well, the parallels to that is that being suspicious is in your DNA, clearly. It's even from your mother. And so when COVID hit, I saw in another interview, you were already sus of it.
It took me about a month. The first month I was still in La La Land because I was living a very normie life. And even though I did not trust certain things about the government because I was a Trumper and I knew that fake news, like I was all about fake news and Trump and all that. And I hated Obama. And so I had a lot of political views that were in line with not trusting the government. However, I did not know not to trust pharma. And I did not know that the government's capable of doing something this evil. And I had no clue about the New World Order. And I didn't know what the Illuminati was. Like I basically was clueless about all those details. I just knew that like something is weird. And I think that my social media started like developing with me speaking out about my journey of waking up to some strange stuff. And I was questioning a lot. So in the beginning, it wasn't that like right away I was like, this is a pandemic, haha. No, I was afraid of COVID. I bought the N95s. I bought the Lysol. I bought the toilet paper. I stayed locked up in my house. But then very quickly, I started catching on. And then
Can you remember what the first thing was? Like what
yeah,
the...
oh, I know that there were three things and maybe four that basically woke me up, and it all happened very quickly. The first was the business situation. They allowed big businesses to open and small businesses to close. And I'm a small business, so I was kind of like, I don't understand. I'm allowed to go to Costco and be with 500 people online, but I can't go to a tiny little business that's, in my view, more safe. So that didn't make sense, and that was weird. Then the BLM protests, I was horrified to see 50,000 people gathered together, no masks. That was when I was still afraid of COVID. So I was like, this is going to cause death. Like, what's going on here? Yet no one condemned it. And not only that, they joined it and supported it. So I was like, why would they support that? But yet they would demonize a chassid who makes a funeral for 100 people in Brooklyn. Like, why would the chassid be on the cover of the Post? And that's wrong, but it's okay for a BLM protest. So then I started making fun of it on social media, saying, oh, now I understand. All I have to do is hold a sign up that says Jewish Lives Matter, and then I can make a wedding and I can make a party. So I mocked it. And of course, I got a lot of hate for that because, people called me racist. People called me, insensitive. And I was like, I'm just pointing the hypocrisy. That makes no sense. And then the third thing, which was the nail on the coffin, in my view, was when I watched the frontline doctors stand in front of Congress with their white coats, and they told us that they found a cure. And I believed them because I saw that they were telling the truth. So I was so excited because in my view, now that we have a cure, we could take a deep breath. Like we're saved. We have a cure, hydroxy, like, yay, it works. And then they shut down these doctors. And as soon as I saw that they shut them down, I said, wait, no, that makes no sense. You're shutting down doctors who are trying to tell you that they're seeing like success with something. If anything, you should just say, wow, that sounds interesting. Let's explore it. To shut it down. So that was, to me, like, I was like, all right, they're hiding something. They're doing something. Something's going on. And then my instincts from my childhood and everything came back to me. And then I went on survival mode. That was when survival mode kicked in. I was like, all right, my great-grandfather, he suddenly, my great-grandfather entered my body, and I was like, oh boy, something's rotten here. We got to get out of here.
Yeah.
So then I applied for Aliyah, to move to Israel, because I was like, we had to escape, like my great-grandfather moved to Israel. So I was like, I need to go to Israel. But then I saw what Israel was doing. And I was like, oh no, I'm not going to Israel. I love Israel. And but I will not go there during, like, when they're behaving that way. So then I'm like, husband, we're going to Florida. And that's where I am right now.
With that BLM march, they had one in Melbourne. Remember this, Leon? We got the pandemic here, and
yes,
they allow a BLM march for the incident in America. Thousands of people, no one gets arrested, and the Melbourne police, get on their knee to say they will never use police brutality. Oh. And then a few weeks later, they're shooting protesters
with rubber bullets,
pepper spraying, beating up old women, pushing them down. There are some scenes, like when they pushed that old woman down and pepper sprayed her. If you made it black and white, you could stick it in Schindler's List, it would fit. And but that was it, a BLM march. So why is this BLM march allowed? The government's allowing it. Like, you're going,
because it suited them. It suited their agenda. They needed this BLM to destroy and divide, and it suited their agenda. It was part of the agenda to destroy us.
They even shut down the synagogues. I think it was the first time, wasn't it, Leon, since the war?
Yes, that's right. So Avi Yamini did a coverage on that in Melbourne in 2021. They shut down the synagogues, and a few hundred meters away, they allowed an indoor Thai boxing match with 100 people to go ahead. Yet they were laying siege, and they trapped 70 worshippers inside one synagogue. They had riot police on horseback. It was a very surreal situation.
In the beginning, when they shut the synagogues, I was okay with it, because remember, I was caught up. I thought that this thing was real, and I thought we were going to all die. But then 2 weeks to flatten the curve went on, and I was like, wait a second. During the Holocaust, the Jews did everything they could to worship God, even though it risked their lives. Like, my grandfather on the other side used to be the guy in Auschwitz who would create like matzah out of dust right, during Passover, or like candles out of potatoes for Hanukkah. And he knew that if he was caught, he would be shot. Not only he, the whole barrack would be shot. Yet he said, nope, we're celebrating Passover. We're celebrating Hanukkah. And I looked at the wimpy rabbis in my community, which is another reason why I left the community, because I was just like, I'm disgusted by the way they behave. And I look at them and they're not only shutting down their shuls, and they could have done it secretly, but they continued. But when the governor finally said, we are allowing you to have 10 people in your backyard, like we're officially allowing you to have 10 measly people in your backyard, the rabbi said, we're going to wait an extra 2 weeks just to be safe. And I remember when they said that, I wanted to throw up. I'm like, you're waiting an extra 2 weeks, really, to serve God? Like, what is wrong with you? You know, you have permission now from the stupid governor, whatever his name is, Cuomo, and now you're waiting 2 more weeks. Something was wrong when I saw that. That was, to me, like, you guys are really sick people that you're waiting.
It wasn't just the rabbis, though. All the spiritual leaders abandoned us. You know, every church here was closed. I mean, there was one church in Melbourne. It's an Anglican church. We were doing these marches, and all these people were carrying religious symbols in the marches. It was like, and all different denominations. But the church had a big sign on it called, "We welcome refugees." And because we were unvaccinated, we were the refugees in our own country now. And the police was the church was surrounded by lines and lines of police that wouldn't let you near it. And you're just going, can't anyone see how incredibly mad this is?
Yeah.
In fact, bordering mad, bordering on evil. And
right,
we heard nothing from any spiritual leader at all. Nothing. They even had a sign on one church. So just to finish, a sign on one church that I saw said, Jesus wants you to get the jab. Jesus.
You know, they didn't allow, obviously, unvaccinated into the synagogue, or if they did, they made you go to a separate section. So my husband refused. He said, I will not do that. I will not be divided like in the Holocaust. Not happening. So the rabbi was upset. So he said, can we have a meeting to discuss this? So we said, sure, come to our house. You could come to our house. We'll have a meeting. So the rabbi came to our house. And my husband looked at the rabbi and said, do you believe in God? So the rabbi goes, yeah, I believe in God. Of course I believe in God. He said, well, you know I had COVID, right? You know I have antibodies. You know antibodies are God's natural immunity. So how can you say you believe in God and yet you're denying God's immunity? You're basically making it seem like I'm a disease carrying vector, but God gave me this immunity. I just had COVID and you're separating me? Like, what kind of rabbi are you, you know? And the rabbi was dumbfounded. He had no answer to that. He kind of was like, well, okay, well, you say you have antibodies? Okay, no problem. You could come back. Like, he had no choice. The logic was there. Like, what are you doing?
The logic, though, has been the failing of so many people. I mean, that's why in Melbourne now, Australia, we talk about the rise of a form of communism, because people are believing what the government and mainstream media tells them and switching off their own critical thinking, their own instinct. I think that's why a lot of people are really angry with themselves that, you know, if instinct is the voice of God, they've actually sort of ignored the voice of God that said, don't do it, be suspicious, to trust Big Pharma and the government to their detriment.
Also, they were worshiping science as opposed to God. You know, I called it religion of Faucism. They basically became Faucists, and they worshiped science. Right. Trust the science, not trust God, trust the science. Now we know natural immunity is better than vaccinated immunity, but they trusted the science. And I think people are waking up now. I really do. I see it very clearly. And the people who are not admitting that they were wrong or that they were lied to are those who are just terrified. I think they're so terrified that they'd rather just shut themselves off and not say anything and not talk about it because it's too terrifying of a thing. Because think about it. Wouldn't you be terrified if you knew that you had this thing in your body? I don't think I'd be able to sleep, or I would, any little symptom I had, I would be paranoid. It would not be a life if I had that fear in me. So imagine all these billions of people out there who are now faced with the truth. It's so scary that they'd rather just not talk about it. And that's what I'm seeing. A lot of people either are not talking about it or they're terrified and they're running to people like me. How do I get this out of me? How do I detox? And thank God there are lots of people helping people detox. So I try to help them in that way. But
I certainly don't want to be in the shoes of people who have given it to their children and encouraged their loved ones to take it. I can't even imagine, can't even comprehend.
Oh, I mean, I was just with a mom this weekend who said to me, my daughter had no choice. She had to go to school and she did it. She goes, I don't even know what to do with myself. I pray every day that she's okay. I don't know. Like she was tortured. This mother was tortured. She knew it was bad, but she had no choice. She had no choice. We had a choice. Everyone had a choice. That's the truth.
I interviewed a mother yesterday in her 70s. Now, her 51-year-old daughter was a big believer, worked in medical, worked with as a medical stenographer, really believed, took the vaccine, basically got her kids to take the vaccine. And then the second one gave her all these symptoms and she was getting sicker and sicker. But the doctors wouldn't believe her. They just said she had anxiety. They just wouldn't take her seriously. She ended up in a mental hospital because they said she had depression, and it was there she took her own life. She actually told her mum, the person I am is gone. I can't live with these symptoms. But the reality, we were talking to her mother about it, the thing that killed her really was that she wasn't acknowledged. She'd done what was right. She believed the government. Obviously, she was severely injured and getting worse. And the government and the doctors just said, get out of here. We don't want to know you. You disrupt the narrative. And so she felt abandoned. And she's symbolic of a lot of people now. And it must be really tragic. And even when she's passing, she must be thinking, I gave this to my children. You know, that would have been in her.
It's a genocide what happened. It really is. What's happening, what happened, what's continuing to happen is a genocide in my view.
Yeah, I agree. Like
I still don't understand how, I mean, in our history, Michal, in the Jewish history, we just experienced the Holocaust, so much trauma, and there's also Soviet communism. Jews suffered under that, and we've had, since time immemorial, we've experienced tyranny, and so we should have developed a healthy, at least somewhat of a healthy distrust of authority. So I just don't get it. I was just wondering, seeing that you're a very perceptive person, I'm struggling to understand the psychology of why so many people in our community, in the Jewish world, are just going along with this agenda. I just can't grasp that. I was wondering.
Right. So my answer to that is, first of all, you'll notice that the people who least went along with it in the Jewish communities were the Hasidim. You do know that, right? The Hasidic communities, with exception to those who follow rabbis who were bought and bribed, I hate to say it, but with exception to those, most of the Hasidim, in my view, distrusted completely and did not go along with it and did not mask their children and did not vax their children. And the reason is because they do remember the Holocaust very well. They did suffer, and I think that they do have a distrust, and they also have a very strong faith in God. They really have a strong faith in God. They don't care about the outside world. On the other hand, I come from
who are these people? Just for the people that aren't watching, that aren't Jewish.
Ultra Orthodox, the ones that you see, the Zacchaeus and the Streimels. Yeah. Believe me, majority of them.
That keep the synagogues open in Melbourne.
Oh, yeah. They kept the synagogues open in Borough Park and Muncie and Lakewood. Let me tell you, majority of them are not vaccinated for COVID. They're not. And I believe because, number one, they have a very strong trust in God. They could care less about what the world thinks of them. They don't like the government. And they also know how to do things. They get around everything. That's the way they are. They're very good at getting around things, for good and for bad. You know what I mean? That's how they are. But I'm from the modern Orthodox community, which is educated, assimilated, caring about what people think, caring about the world. That's my world. And so the reason why my world, 99.9% fell for it, right, in my world, is because we are very educated. We go to college, we're doctors, we're lawyers, we're accountants. We're just people who are part of the world, and we love being part of the world. We love being accepted by the world. We want the world to love us. And that's the reason why we went along with it, because we don't want to look like were doing anything bad or that were making, they call it a chilul Hashem. That was a big word, which means degrading God's name and looking bad to the world. You know, not me, but my community was embarrassed when they saw the Hasidim in the paper, in the New York Post. They would post the Hasidim. The Hasidim had funerals. The Hasidim did this. And my community was horrified, and they would talk so badly about our brothers, our Hasidic brothers, because they were embarrassing us. They were a shanda, you know? And so I think that's the difference. I think that's the answer.
I find it interesting that you bring up the Hasidim, because if you remember the measles outbreak a few years back, they were the first people to be demonized. So widely demonized by both Jews and the mainstream media and the outside world.
Hello, Cuomo demonized them by making red zones and yellow zones and orange zones. And guess what the red zones were? They were all the Hasidim. That was the red zones. All from the religious ultra-Orthodox areas were the red zones. And that was such bull, because Harlem had more cases than Borough Park. And yet Borough Park was a red zone and Harlem was not. So it was crazy, the anti-Semitism and how they demonized the Hasidic people, and they still do. And I think that's why the Hasidim were much more like lax, and they didn't buy it. They didn't fall for it. Some did. Okay, some ultra-Orthodox did fall for it because their rabbis told them, do it. You know, do it. So the ones whose rabbis were bought and paid for, they're the ones that followed their rabbi and did it. But the other ones, believe me, there were tons of Hasidim who did not do it.
You just reminded me that at the height of the BLM march, when they had that little funeral with 100 people, and they had tens of thousands of people marching for BLM in Manhattan, de Blasio wanted to actually go to Brooklyn to personally arrest the Hasidim that were there. It's just a surreal situation. He was the mayor of New York at the time, just for the viewers that are listening.
Yes, I call him, his nickname is DePazio. That was his nickname for me. And that's an example of the things that I would talk about during that time that got me probably canceled, because I was very upfront. I was like, anti-Semitism, you know, and then of course I would talk about ivermectin, hydroxy, the vaccine, all these things got me to platforms.
It's interesting. It reminds me of the Amish, because we were seeing that the Amish were coming under great attack as well. In fact, they were threatening to take their children off them. Yeah, well, they're not vaccinated against anything. That's why they have no autism amongst their number. Nothing, you know.
Healthy, very healthy. But I'm a little worried. I'm worried about the Amish right now, because the whole spill that happened in Ohio was dangerously close to their farms in Pennsylvania. So it's a little scary what's going on with that situation. You know, they don't like the Amish. The Amish are the control group.
Yeah, that's right.
You look at the Amish and you're like, why is it that they're so healthy? Why do they have no autism? Why, you know?
The memes going around, why are there no COVID cases among the Amish? Because they don't have television. That was what the memes were saying.
Right. They had herd immunity from the beginning. And even the New York Times wrote an article about it. Interestingly enough, even mainstream media said, you know, Amish has herd immunity because they didn't mask, because they didn't follow the craziness.
With the thing in America, though, with people believing it, how's it now with so much? I mean, we said follow the science. The science, if you follow the science, it all comes back to us now. We own the science. We've won that battle. I say in Australia, we lost the vaccination battle because so many people took it, but we've won the science battle. In fact, they never say follow the science anymore. So what is it now? How is it now there? Are people coming to you and waking up and going, oh my God, you know, you were right. Are you getting any of that?
So yes, I occasionally get stopped by people who say, you're right, but that happens. Most of the time I get stopped by people saying, thank you. Thank you for being there for me. You helped me through this horrible couple of years. Because of you, I didn't do this. Because of you, I knew better. You saved my life because of your guidance with ivermectin. I've gotten hundreds of times, right? But I think that overall, the people who really are triple, quadrupled at this point, they just don't want to talk about it. And I have plenty of friends like that, and they just are like they almost like to say, it's over now. It's over. Like they say,
Yeah, they
oh, it's
do.
over. It's over. And I'm like thinking to myself, no, it's not over. It's just beginning, but okay. And I try not to get into any debates with them because I need to be normal also. I need to be able to have healthy relationships with my friends, even those who are quadrupled. But as soon as they come to me and ask me questions, I'm there for them. Like, it's like awesome. Like if they suddenly say, what, like, tell me about this. Oh, I'm like, you ready? Okay, great. Let's sit down, have coffee, and let me tell you all about the New World Order. So I always get excited finally when people approach me, but usually my quadruples are trying very hard to deny everything.
It's interesting what you said also about the control group, the Amish being the control group. I mean, Leon and I are unvaccinated. Right. Do you know any unvaccinated human that's been approached by big Pfizer for a study as the control group? Because we're supposed to be in a trial. I don't know anybody. And yet,
isn't that amazing? There's so many who are not. There are so many.
Yeah.
And we should make an announcement. We're looking for people who are unvaccinated to volunteer to tell us about what their life has been like for the past 3 years. None of them will ever do that. Just like they don't do it with the regular vaccines, they're never going to do it ever.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because, I mean, there was massive marches in Melbourne. Leon and I should have died numerous times because, and I actually had a free hug army where we were hugging people. And so we should have constantly be long in time in the grave. And yet we're all healthy. I don't know anybody from the freedom movement in Australia who's died of COVID, not one. What's that?
What?
Or had myocarditis.
Yes, or have myocarditis. It's such an extraordinary time. Is that the same there? Are people still refusing to switch on their critical thinking and see what is there?
Even my relatives who know my view and who kind of follow me, even though they try not to because they're scared, people are dropping like flies in my community where I come from. I moved from New York. Every day there's another notice of another death. And, especially my in-laws' age, there are so many people in their 60s and 70s who've suddenly died, or they've gotten turbo cancer, or they've gotten something with their heart. And every time that happens, I will point it out and say, it's not normal what's going on here. And the answer is always, well, people die, and, people have always died even before. Like they're trying so hard to like excuse it away. And what could you say? Like I say, it's about excess. There's a lot of excess right now. Like, have you ever had many funerals before? Like, I understand people died before COVID. Yes, of course. People had heart attacks before COVID. Have you ever seen so many in their 60s and 70s in such a short period of time? Have you ever seen that?
Even earlier, we're meeting people here who are losing friends in their 30s, 40s, 50s.
Oh my God.
We have I don't know if you've heard of it, but below Australia is a little state called Tasmania, a little island. And in that island, there's a little town called Launceston. And I interviewed a funeral director there. And the only reason he woke up is his son had a severe vaccine injury, and the doctors and everyone were ignoring him. So he spoke to me and said, I've been a funeral director for about 14, 15 years. I bury 2 people a week. Usually 80s, 90s, this is what I usually do. Now I'm burying 7 a week. Wow. He's one of 4 funeral things. The other 3 wouldn't talk to us. He goes, it's 7. I can't keep up.
Oh my God.
That video went crazy. Pierre Corday shared it. It went crazy around the world. But the thing is, the Launceston newspaper didn't want to know. And I'm thinking, these are your people. You work in the town. You're journalists in this little town. You know these people who are dying, and you won't speak about it. And he said a lot of them are 40, 50-year-olds who just don't wake up. And he said everything's suspicious. And it's extraordinary. And so that's a statement. But the question is, even for where is the anger? Where is the survival instinct kicking in? But especially the anger of going, hey, what's going on here? There seems to be
scary. The answer is it's too scary. So like my in-laws' generation, they all did it. They didn't just do it; they did it 4 times. So instead for them to accept the fact that their friends are dropping like flies means that they have to accept that they could be dropping like flies. And that is the scariest feeling for someone 70 something years old, to think, you think you have another 30 years left of life, and every day you're like, am I going to be the next one dropping dead? Let me just be in denial. Let me stick my head in the sand. I think that is human nature also, to be in denial. People like us are exceptional. The fact that we are able to face this head on, even though it's so scary. And it helps that we're not vaccinated, because I think that if we were, we try our best to make it less scary. Oh, it's not that bad. Maybe it's a coincidence. It's human nature to try to protect yourself in that way. So I think we think it's human nature to have survival instinct and get angry. But the opposite, I think it's human nature, if you're quadruple vaccinated or triple vaccinated, to be like, no, it's fine. Everything's going to be okay. Right? Don't you agree?
Mm.
That's what I'm witnessing among my family and my peers, because 99% of them are vaccinated. That's what I see. So
well, the other interesting thing, though, over here was masks. People were and they were policing themselves. I mean, there's one little town I went to, there's only 1,200 people in the town. I was telling Leon this the other day. The local cop was getting 200 calls a day of people in this town dobbing each other in for not wearing masks, for going outside. This policing of each other. Do you feel in America now that maybe, because when I think of America, I think of the land of the free, people who, basically covet their freedom and will defend it. But what's happened? They don't. It's almost like they believe the government has a right to kill them. It's
very frightening.
I understand it.
Right. It was very shocking and frightening to see how everyone fell for the mask situation, which is so obviously doesn't work. Everyone with logic knows that it didn't work.
Fauci said it doesn't work before.
Right. And yet he changed his mind and then said you have to take 2 or 3 of them. So I think that the mask situation, it became a pacifier. It became like the only way that they could control and feel like they're doing something. So human beings felt like this one thing is the only thing that we could do to save us and protect us. And they went extreme on that, even though logically they knew that it really doesn't work, I think. And maybe some of them really believed it worked. I mean, till today, I still see people in Florida, even in Florida, walking down the street. But now I think it's sad. Like when you see people walking down the street wearing a mask by themselves, you just look at them and you're like, you're mentally ill. I feel really bad for you. Like I want to go over to them, but I don't. But I want to just go over to them and be like, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? So I think that's what happened. People use it as a crutch or as a pacifier.
Mm.
And listen, the schools got paid to mask the children. So even though many of the administration did not believe in it at all, trust me, I know, but they insisted because if they didn't, they would get in trouble. So they didn't want to get in trouble and they got money. So they were like, all right, what's the big deal? Let's torture the children and mask them.
I wanted to ask you, Michal, so it's related to this. So people know, I guess a lot of people know the truth deep down, but they suppress that and they don't want to speak up for fear, out of fear, whether it's their reputation, their careers. We've got a really bizarre situation in Australia where we, in our community, in the Jewish community, which is very small, we've got a US-based rabbi who's coming here. It's in the final stages of a job application. He's most likely going to be appointed as the head rabbi, and he said something controversial a few years ago. He called people that were unvaccinated in his own community as road fimps. So when you call someone a roadif, it's like a death sentence. You're basically saying that, implying maybe he didn't mean that, but the implication is that they might have to be killed in that situation because they're a threat to others. Now, so we're in this bizarre situation. He said this controversial statement, and no one forced him to say it. He hasn't retracted it. It's still on his website. So we're in a situation where people are too afraid to confront him, and if they do, that would be seen as controversial. So it's very bizarre. It's as if they did something wrong, and he's in the right. And how dare you approach him and question him? So a lot of people in the community are scared, and it's the same thing in the wider, not just the Jewish community, the wider community as well. So what's your message? I mean, seeing that you're very outspoken, not only you're outspoken, you're very articulate and well-spoken. What's your message to people who are might be watching this and know the truth, but are just too afraid to stand up and speak up?
Honestly, I wouldn't be afraid to have a very respectful dialogue with this rabbi, considering he's the new guy in town, and say, you know, we're very happy that you're coming and joining us. However, there is something that you said that is disturbing, and we'd like to talk about it. And now that all the truth has come out, and we now see that the vaccine does not stop the spread, and it's not as effective as they claimed it to be. And in fact, there are studies that are showing that it actually is harmful, and it causes myocarditis in young boys, and it crosses the placenta, and it causes strokes. Can you retract that statement? That would make us feel so much better if we knew that you retract it, because calling somebody a rodef is the worst thing you could ever call another human being. Basically implying that we deserve death. So we'd like to start our relationship in a positive way. Can you retract the fact that you said that people like us should die, please? You know, and I think that if you say that to that rabbi, if he's a good person, he should be able to have a dialogue and say, well, listen, back then I believe blah, 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 blah. I mean, and if he doesn't, then who's hiring this guy? And why is he coming? Like, why is he coming? Why is he being accepted in the community?
One reason for doing this show with Leon was the Jewish community is in a different place than the rest of the community because you had the Holocaust. And not just because you had the Holocaust, but the Germans basically demonized the Jews. You know what I mean? They used all their propaganda, calling them dirty, disease-ridden, all these things pre-war. Now we're seeing here that the governments around the world, from the President Biden, with the pandemic of the unvaccinated, they were doing the same to the unvaccinated. That's where I saw the parallels. They were getting a part of the community and saying, these are the bad people, these are the problem. How could the Jewish community see what was happening and not see the parallels and not en masse speak out against it, saying you can't do this?
It's a very good question. And I think, again, it comes down to the fact that they not only were brainwashed, and like Robert Malone, Dr. Malone says, mass psychosis. I think he's the one that coined it or whatever. But the fact that it was so not PC to compare it to the Holocaust, that if you even dare to even say the word Holocaust in the same sentence as pandemic, right, or what was happening, you would be demonized so badly that people just shut up and didn't even bother to go that direction. And people like me who did go that direction would get killed on social media for it. I didn't care. I never apologized for it. I said, are you guys nuts? Of course there's a parallel. And look at Vera Sharabi. I mean, take it up with the Holocaust survivor. You have a problem? Go to Vera Sharabi. Tell her to her face, a Holocaust survivor, that she's wrong. Like, I would speak up, but not everybody has a big mouth like me. And most people are afraid of being looked at in a negative way. So that's my answer. I think people are very afraid of what people think.
Wow. So fear corrupts their morality.
Fear ran everything. Right. Fear in the past 3 years was the single thing that ran the show. Fear of COVID, fear of death, fear of this, fear of that. The irony is that they were so afraid of dying from COVID that they were willing to do an experiment that had no proof whether it would help you or not and whether it will kill you or not. That wasn't scary. That is so strange to me. Like, I was terrified of the vaccine from the beginning, and I wasn't an anti-vaxxer, but the idea of putting this thing in my body was so horrifying and terrifying to me. The same kind of fear that for someone who is afraid of COVID. I like, that's the parallel, I think. I just didn't understand how they couldn't be afraid of something like that, yet they were afraid of COVID that had a 99.9% survival rate, and the vaccine was unknown. Where was the logic in that? They were brainwashed. That's the answer. They were brainwashed.
The other thing at the moment that's happening in Australia, and I don't know if it's happening in Florida, is the attack on our language, especially when it comes to women. a perfect example. I can't bring it up now, but a government website, health website, did a post about menopause symptoms, and it's saying what all the symptoms are. And then it gets to this part where it says, if you're a vagina owner between 45 and 55, you will go through this. And you're going, sorry, vagina owner? You're going to stand up at your mother's funeral and go, this is the most beautiful vagina owner I ever met? You know, I don't want to know she had a vagina myself, but the actual, you know, but this is that it sounds like a joke, but it's happening constantly. There's stuff coming from England, seed carriers, they're calling them, birthing parent. So in when they go to hospital here to give birth, they're not allowed to call them mother. The hospital has to call them a birthing parent. A frontal birther is the new one.
Happening in America. It's happening in America very much so. However, why am I in Florida? Because DeSantis is anti that. My governor, DeSantis, is completely anti that. He's anti a lot of things, thank God.
Yeah, he's amazing.
He's amazing. So I'm in Florida because Florida is the only free state left. I mean, maybe Texas, I don't know. But Florida is amazing right now. I'm not delusional in thinking that this is going to be forever. You know, all it takes is for DeSantis to lose an election and we have another woke person and everything goes down the toilet. So I don't believe that this is a forever situation, but for the moment, we have a governor who is against digital currency, against wokeism, against the, you know, what they're groomers and all the things that they're doing to the children, drag queens, you know, reading books and all that stuff. But it is for sure.
Well, the question is,
there's a connection between all of these things, the vaccine, the transgender movement, or are they separate issues?
Oh, it's one big connection, because all you have to do is study about the New World Order and about who's behind the New World Order and what their goal is. And one of the biggest goals is to eliminate God. And by eliminating women and the sexes and destroying what God created, that's the best way to eliminate God, right? So it is all connected.
Well, you know, I think the word mother is as sacred as the word God. You know what I mean? It's one of the most sacred words in our language, and they're removing it. But my question was going back, and it incorporates what Leon just said. So people wouldn't stand up against the government, against COVID. They wouldn't stand up against the masks. But why won't they stand up against the removal of the word mother or woman?
Right.
You know, surely is there nothing they will fight for? Because you're not going to be ostracized. You're not going to be sent in jail for saying, no, I'm calling my mum. What is it, do you think? Or do you think
Listen, I think that there are people who are fighting against it.
There are some, but, you know.
There's a whole movement against it. You know, libs of TikTok, who I just met, Chaya Reichik, her name is, she started an account literally just posting liberal TikToks, basically. And she didn't even have to say anything. It was self-explanatory. You watch it and you're just like, this is ludicrous. And people tried doxing her and tried canceling her. But at the end of the day, millions of people in America are totally against what's happening. It's just that the powers that be are so powerful, and they own the media, and they own Hollywood. So they're using all their tools, which is Hollywood, the media, money, this, that, to basically make it seem like everyone's for it. It is not true that everyone's for it. It's a very
No, they're just silent. And evil prospers when good people do nothing. Yeah.
Right. They're too silent. That is true. And, you know, we need to fight for God, because this is literally a war against God. I view this as the Tower of Babel, the Tower of Babel. And they're building this tower saying, we are able to kill God, and we're going to build this we're going to shoot God, we're going to kill God. And at the end of the day, God destroyed it and created all these languages. And next thing you know, it was chaos. God's going to do the same. It's just a matter of when. Like this whole thing is going to be blown up. I really believe that. And I also am a very big believer in the Messiah. I do think that we're going to be redeemed from all this craziness. This has all been predicted, by the way. You know, Christians, Jews believe the same thing in that respect. All this has been prophesized, like what's happening now. Good will be evil, evil will be good, our leaders will be like dogs. There's so many things that they predicted, and it's happening right now as we speak. So it's called the birth pangs of Messiah. We are experiencing the birth pangs right now. It's torture. But they say that those
leaders will be like dogs. What does that term mean?
That's a term that was written in one of the prophecies. They will be like dogs. And what does that mean? So in funny ways, the mask made a lot of leaders look like dogs, in my view. But I think it more means that dogs are always looking to their owner, and they follow the owner. You know what I mean? They're not leaders. They're followers. I think our leaders are not leaders. They're like dogs. They're literally dogs, wagging their tail, following the owner.
The Talmud describes this generation as the face of a dog.
The face of a dog. That's another prophecy.
It's really prophetic, isn't it? It's hard not to sort of agree with that. It's because I agree with you. It's
dig into that. Like, I'm not as educated about every prophecy, but I will tell you that once you get into the prophecies, you're just kind of like, OMG, that's literally what's happening right now.
Yeah.
There was one prophecy where they actually even used the word zrika, which means shot. Zrika means shot in Hebrew. And there was one prophecy, I wish I remembered it, where it said something like, the zrika will be killing people. And it's like, oh my God, that's literally what happened. The shot is killing people. So it's happening.
By the way, the Hebrew word for mask is the same word for idolatry or molten image. Just the exact same word.
Really?
And it's used in the Bible. That's right. It refers to idolatry.
Right. Listen, the Jews unfortunately have worshipped idols throughout history. The whole Baal and worship and Molech and giving your children over. That happened with the Jews, correct? Am I wrong? So in a way, that's what the Jews were doing now, and not just the Jews, the whole world. They were literally sacrificing their children to the god of Fauci and the god of, you know what I mean? It was a sacrifice.
Just another manifestation of the same thing, basically.
And they say that yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that those who are going to survive this horrible time are the ones who just hold on to the string, because God is going to shake the world. And those who hold on tight and stay true to God are the ones who are going to survive this. And those who don't are going to go. They're not going to survive. And by the way, only 20% will survive. They say 80% will go. So that's the prophecy, sadly.
With that, one of the things that people were terrified of, actually, more than the virus, was being ostracized and being cancelled. And I've met people who basically took it just to appease people. They've actually said that to me now quietly. I took it because my family was saying they're going to not allow me to Christmas and this, so I just gave in. You didn't. Now, how have you changed? How have you benefited from facing the fear and pushing through the fear of being ostracized? How have you benefited from that?
It's weird because I never cared about being ostracized. And I don't know why. Like, honestly, I don't know what made me not fear being ostracized. I was a prominent person in my community. Everyone knew me. I had a successful business. I had a lot of friends, and I was very charitable. Why did I not care? I don't know. I just know that I didn't. Like, I was public. I didn't care. I was the one who put my neck out there in my children's schools, and I was harassing all the teachers and sending, to the administration, all the links about masks and saying, they don't work. What are you doing? PCR tests are bogus. I was sending all this information. I looked like a crazy person, and they probably thought I was a crazy person, but I didn't care. So I don't know. I don't know what made me not care, but I just didn't. I didn't care if I was canceled. I didn't care if they posted my picture and called me a mask hole, which they did, by the way. One of my peers, they called me a mask hole. They called me a mask hole because I was against masks. So they labeled me a mask hole, and they put my picture on Facebook saying, this is an influencer. She's a mask hole who's against masks. And I remember I laughed when I saw my picture on Facebook. I was like, great, this is an opportunity for me to talk back. Yay, you're starting up with me. Woo, I love when people start up with me. And I went right at this person and publicly, you know, I've been doing that forever. Like I went against rabbis publicly and I didn't care. So I don't know.
Can I ask the same question of Leon? Exactly the same question, Leon. How have you benefited, even emotionally or something, from not being frightened, being ostracized, about standing your ground? Because you face it as well.
To be honest, I mean, it's human nature. We all want to be included in social groups. You know, there is sometimes, you know, you have self-doubt. But in my case, what's driven me, I mean, there was a number of factors. I think the main factor were the children. I think that's where they really crossed the line when they started to mess with the children. And I have, you know, when they were rolling out the vaccines to 5-year-old children, it's the youngest 5. At the time, I had a daughter. My youngest daughter was 5 years old. And that just drove me to, especially in the local community, I mean, it was just surreal to see this, you know, 70 years after the Holocaust. You've got these authority figures that are supposed to look after our best interests, these religious figures. You've got these volunteer paramedic service called Hatzalah, which built a lot of trust. And then all of a sudden, they're pushing these bioweapons onto our children. And that's what's driven me. And I don't really care about being ostracized. Look at the cost of not speaking out. Look at our children.
The only reason I meant it for both of you, what I'm saying is they've done a propaganda war against us. And one of the things they actually said was, do you want to be ostracized? So they instilled that fear. So what I'm trying to see is, for people who are frightened of being ostracized, is how has your life improved, or has it improved at all by suffering, by being ostracized, by standing your ground? You know, have you emotionally benefited, got stronger, got closer to God, anything like that? That's what I meant by my question.
I got closer
I'll
to
start
God.
with you.
I got closer to God. I was always religious, but oh boy, this whole thing got me so much more, like, I had so much more faith, because I'm like, all I have left is God. God is the only truth. So I didn't care what people thought, because I'm with truth. I'm with God. I don't follow Fauci. I don't follow Faucism. I follow God, Hashem. So for me, it got me stronger. And truth is, I got a lot of respect from people, believe it or not. As much as I was ostracized by certain people, I had thousands of people who literally gave me so much respect. They stopped me. I can't even walk down the street without people stopping me. So There was such good feelings also, that it actually made me feel like I am completely on the right side of history. I'm doing the right thing. And it gave me more confidence. So for me, it was all positive. There was no negative. Being canceled from Instagram, that's a badge of honor. Telling the truth. If you're canceled on Instagram, you're a truth teller. It's a badge of honor.
That's right. 5 times.
Yeah. It means I'm really truthful.
I'm YouTube. 6 YouTube channels gone. They don't even warn me now. You just got to log in. It's not there. And but how about you, Leon? The same question, and that's more to how you've changed. And is there any sort of personal emotional benefits you've got from it?
Look, I think definitely it's shaped me to be a stronger person, but I'm not going to lie to you. I am human and I've got my bad days. So there are days where I struggle with, I get disillusioned and I have doubts. And especially when I see people who I think should know better, people in positions of authority that are acting, you know, beneath their role. So that sometimes makes me feel disillusioned and question things, but that's just the human in me. But overall, you know, it's definitely made me stronger and a better person, and it's strengthened my faith in God.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? That I suffered the same disillusion. And when we went out the other day, we were talking about that. I don't know if it's the same with you, but you're watching people who seem so blasé and happy and thinking, all these people are dying. They've got digital ID coming in. All these things are happening, and you look like you're blissful.
You're going to the football.
Yeah, you know, and it's just
talking about the football, the sport.
Yeah, that's what I'm struggling with at the moment, and because you're trying to hold on to your sanity, going, no, but it doesn't take long to realize I know. There's something really, really.
They're in the matrix. They're in the matrix. They're not out of the matrix yet.
Mm,
They're in the matrix, and we got out of it somehow. And we're wearing these glasses that see things so differently, and we can't believe that these people just don't see it, but they're in the matrix.
if
But
you had
people are waking
a
up.
if you had a message to say not just the Jewish community in Australia, but to people in Australia about where they are now and where we're going, because it's a global thing now, so we're all one, what would that be?
It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up and turn to God, because that's the only truth there is in this world. There is nothing else. Erase everything you've ever been taught. Nothing has been true. You know what I mean? Like, just start from scratch. In my view, everything's been a lie, and the only truth is God. So wake up and save yourself before it's too late. Otherwise, you know, the consequences are going to be great if you don't wake up soon. But don't be afraid. Wake up and be strong. And, you know, it's kind of like there's a chessboard happening and the bad guys are playing chess, and it's on our back and we're literally lying there. And all we have to do is stand up and the game is over. So we need at least 20%. That's a good number. 20% of you to wake up. If you wake up and you're not afraid of what people think of you, this can end. This could end, and redemption can happen. A great awakening, redemption, whatever you want to call it. But if you keep yourself hunched over and let them play on your back, you might be that 80% that's not going to survive this ordeal. So wake up.
I love that analogy.
Yeah, me too. I can see it. You know, you just see it. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
Literally what's happening. They're playing chess on us.
Yeah. Maybe we'll jump on AI, see if it can create it.
Right? And they've been doing this for a long time, as we know. This is not something that's, it happened 3 years ago.
Quite clear.
They've been planning this this has been in the works. I've read books that they basically said this is what's going to happen. You know, here it is. Here we are. So it's planned. So it's time to just understand what's going on.
Leon, do you have any last questions?
And Michal, by the way, I've heard you speak about Dr. Zelenko before, and I think you live streamed from his funeral.
Yes.
Have you actually met Dr. Zelenko in person?
Yes, I actually met him for the first time. I met him twice. I met him 2 times. I went to one of his events before he became big, and then I went to another event a couple weeks before he died. And I actually went purposely because I knew he was dying. So I wanted to be in his presence before he dies. I said, I just need to be in the presence of this holy man before he goes and leaves this world. I knew he was on his way out, sadly. So
you spoke about his legacy before. Would you like to say something about that?
I mean, I personally, he saved millions of people. He saved me. And how did he save me? Because he gave me hope that this virus is treatable and that you don't have to die. And when he told us, this is what you have to do and you'll be fine, it calmed me down and it gave me the strength to fight and not be afraid of COVID. And I think that he's responsible for my awakening, because by him giving me that tool that protected me in a sense, that gave me this protection in my mind, it allowed me to do what I was doing without fear. And he really, till today, I'm still on his protocol. I do everything that he said every day, and I even added more to it. And I don't like to say knock on wood because that's not a Jewish concept, but there's a word called li ayin hara, which means without any evil eye. I haven't had a cold in over 3 years. In my life, I've never gone 3 years without having a virus or a flu or a cold. When I had COVID, I didn't know I had it. I was asymptomatic. I attribute it because I take his protocol every single day. I do what he told me to do, and it works.
How did you know you had it?
So the only reason why I knew I had it was because I was traveling to Israel and they tested me and I was positive. And I was like, and I was with all my—
Was that a PCR or a RAT test?
It was a PCR test. And I was with all these vaccinated people the week before, and they all were in bed with 104 fever. And they all kept joking, Michal, get tested because you probably have it too, because we were together. And I look at them, I'm like, I'm fine. I feel great. I don't have it. But then I had no choice but to take the test. And then I call my friends. I'm like, I have it, but I feel fine. Meanwhile, I'm the only unvaccinated one, and I was perfect. And they were triple, and they were literally lying in bed.
No, they were all shedding it.
Yeah.
What?
They're all shedding it. And so you would have been vulnerable in that situation.
I did not. I mean, I caught it, but I didn't.
You might not have had it. I mean, to be honest, the PCR test is so dodgy. Even the rat test.
The only reason why I think I had it, I'll tell you the truth, is because number one, I was with my friends who all had it that week, so it makes sense. And also, the one symptom I had, even though I had no symptoms, was I smelt this weird metal smell.
Oh yeah,
I smelled a metal smell. So I was like, why does it smell like metal?
Yeah.
So that was weird to smell metal out of nowhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was positive, and then I went on ivermectin. Even though I had no symptoms, I said, I have ivermectin. I am not missing this opportunity to go on ivermectin. So I went on ivermectin even though I had no symptoms. And 3 days later, I took the test again to travel, and I was negative. So it literally went in and out of me like that. And I was able to go to Israel as a recovered, which was such a blessing because I would have had to quarantine. But because I had it, I did not have to quarantine. So I was like, this is great. Like, this is perfect. So, but like I said, in my view, the protocol that he gave all of us, saved me and also kept me healthy and is still keeping me healthy. So he's an amazing doctor.
Yeah.
And a person, and he predicted everything that's happening now, sadly. He said people will start dying within 2 years, and it's truly happening. So he knew what he was talking about.
Over here, ivermectin became like heroin. It's the way they treated it. I had a friend, a really good friend, because I got COVID, and he said, I've got some ivermectin. And he said, I'll deliver it to you. But he delivered it to the wrong house. And I'm going, where is it? And he going, it's 47. I said, I'm 44. He had to go back to this house, break into this letterbox to get ivermectin to get it to me. And it's like he's delivering heroin, but this is like the safest drug in the world. You know, it's won a Nobel Prize. What drug wins a Nobel Prize?
So it demonizes horse paste.
Yeah, that's right.
That was the most crazy thing to see that. You are not a horse. It's like, what are you doing? We know, what are you, and unfortunately, a lot of my friends fell for it because when I would bring up ivermectin, they're like, I don't want to take an animal medicine. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Well, you an animal medicine, you're not a horse, but you're not a bat. This thing's supposed to come from a bat. So what's the difference? You know what I mean? So
another conspiracy come true, right? Another one.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Just endless. The conspiracies, endless. They're all true.
Yeah.
So it's great. Yeah.
Well, I'd love to thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure to talk to you this morning, and we'll put this up today, and we'll also make it a podcast and share that to you as well. But thank you very much for talking to us Australians. It's actually really refreshing to hear someone speaking from Florida and speaking so candidly.
The free state of Florida, from beyond the Iron Curtain.
Yeah.
Yes, and there's a lot of people like us. Trust me, there's a lot.
Your governor is a hero, true hero.
He really is.
Yeah.
What do they say? Good dynamite? Good dynamite?
G'day. Oh, we don't say that anymore. I don't hear that in Melbourne much. Do you hear it, Leon? I don't hear it. You used to say she'll be right, but they don't say that anymore. Right?
That's right.
Now they usually go, "Where's your mask?" That's the welcome we do now. Yeah. Put your mask on. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, be brave, everyone. Continue doing what you're doing, and thank you so much for having me.
No problem.